Evidence has shown that malnutrition impedes human development. And because of that, then it means that many Zambians may not achieve their human development goals. So in giving the nutrition situation in our country, we'll look at the food consumption part, we'll also look at the micronutrient status part, and we'll also associate that with mortality. In terms of food consumption, 31% of the Zambian population is classified as undernourished, implying therefore that the 31% of the Zambian population is unable to access adequate dietary needs to meet the dietary requirements for a productive life. Deliberately, we've decided to show how Zambians are accessing biofortified foods. Biofortified foods are those foods where we've worked so hard as a country to introduce other nutrients in those foods. In terms of vitamin A-rich maize, only 10% of the population is accessing vitamin A-rich maize. And only 25% of the population is able to access vitamin A-rich sweet potato. And only 19.9% is able to access iron and zinc-rich beans. So this is a missed opportunity that despite that the food is there, we are unable to access that food. Now let's look at it in terms of a detailed understanding of undernourishment, especially among under 5 children, and what it does to mortality. So when we look at this slide, we are able to see that in general, undernutrition is one of the most serious global health problems that we are encountering. We say, for example, that when we look on the left graph, under 5 mortality in 2018, we see that we are not doing very well, because we have almost like 61 of the children in that age group who are dying as a result of various associated factors. In terms of infant mortality rate, again, we see around 42. And then in terms of neonatal mortality, we also see around 27. Of all the factors that contribute to child mortality, 45% is associated with undernutrition. And so nutrition is a very important determinant, because then we see that stunting, wasting, and micronutrient deficiencies are accounting about 45% of child deaths and 20% of maternal deaths. So nutrition is a very important determinant of human development, and until we address it, it is unethical that we can allow children to die for something that we can do about. So I think there is a call to address deaths associated with undernutrition. And when we look at the life cycle per se, beyond the children, we see in general that children, adolescents, the elderly, they are all affected by one form of malnutrition or another. We see, for example, that in general, only 13% of the children are fed with a minimum acceptable diet. And yet, the food should be there so that all our children should have access to the acceptable diet. But now we only have 13% of our children accessing diet that is acceptable. We also see that 31% of women are anemic, and anemia has serious consequences in terms of human development and productivity. Scientific evidence has shown that when there is a low status in iron, productivity reduces by about 3%. And we know that the women constitute the majority of the labor force in the agriculture sector. And so we can already link that productivity is affected in our country. And we see, as earlier on indicated, that 35% of our children are stunted. This is a chronic type of malnutrition which is prolonging in the population, and we can do something about it. But I think it's important to know that COVID has affected us a lot in terms of service provision. And so therefore, we really need now to gain momentum and increase our rate of service provision to reach the majority of the population if we are to protect the gains that we have already made. Exclusive breastfeeding, again, we have seen that we have not made progress. Instead of moving forward, we've started, going downwards. So there is a lot that we need to do in order to improve the nutrition situation in our country. Ladies and gentlemen, if we look at the scenario of chronic malnutrition at country level, we see that although we are making progress, that progress is not adequate. The World Health Organization has guided that chronic malnutrition above 20% is unacceptable. And those countries with chronic malnutrition above 20% basically require urgent attention. Even though the country has made progress, we can see that there is no region in the country that is basically doing well in terms of WHO acceptable levels. But when we look at the northern part of the country, we see that that is where the burden is, that's where we see the burden, because we see like almost half of the population in the northern parts of the country is affected by chronic malnutrition. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, this should call us to think twice about our level of effort in addressing nutrition situation in our country. Adolescent nutrition, as indicated, we are not making progress. And when we look at this slide, it really should call us to think twice, because we are ushering a population, a young generation, into an arena where they are already malnourished. And I think it is important that we, based on this slide, we look at the future of our country. 17% of the girls aged between 10 and 14 years are stunted, and many of these children are entering adolescence with triple burden of malnutrition, undernutrition, micronutrient deficiencies, and the emerging overweight and obesity. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we need to think twice about this. And if we do not provide the services adequately across the country, then the nutrition situation cannot improve. So, what we are saying is that the nutrition situation in Zambia requires urgent attention if Zambia is to be on track to attain its Vision 2030 on development. It is also critical that stakeholders in nutrition come together as an alliance, not as single entities, as an alliance to address of all forms of malnutrition. These conclusions are founded on strong scientific evidence that we need to come together. And government, through the National Food and Nutrition Commission, therefore calls upon all of you players in nutrition to come together and see what we can do for this country. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening.
Nutrition